I'm Fatma.
And I'm Nicole. Welcome to our program on a special social issue, child abuse.
Recently and locally, a national story was broadcast about the 10-year-old death of a Somali boy named Abdi Fateh Muhammad. He was domestically abused by his stepfather, which later led to his tragic death.
Welcome to Olive Branch. Now, we're not going to talk about the specifics of this case because it's an ongoing investigation, but we want to talk about this sometimes difficult discussion about child abuse because it's very vital for the community to know about this.
And today, to start this discussion, we have three guests joining us. Imam Yahya Umar, Executive Director of HEAL International, Robert Deese, Administrative Director of Child Protective Services, and Judith Olin, Director of the Child Advocacy Center and Child and Adolescent Treatment Services. So once again, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm sure you're going to give us a lot of information today. And so the most basic question we're going to start off with, what is child abuse? And if we can give an example of what that is.
An abused child is a child whose parent or custodian, the person taking care of them, their caretaker, inflicts a serious physical injury or places them at risk of a serious physical injury, or commits sexual abuse against that child. That would be an abused child.
Okay. And would you like to give an example? I know you kind of explained that in the definition.
Sure. An example of an abused child might be an infant whose parent shook them and caused a very serious injury to their head, or a parent who struck an infant and caused a serious internal injury or broke a bone. That would be an instance of abuse.
Okay. Ms. Olin, would you like to add to that? Or?
Well, with respect to sexual abuse cases, which is what our program deals with mostly, you're looking at children who are under the age of 17 who are being subjected to sexual contact by adults. And when a child is younger than 17, they cannot legally consent to sexual activity. Most of the time, unfortunately, we see children being sexually abused by people who they know, including family members. That's most common in sexual abuse cases of children.
Yeah.
And do you guys know any statistics of child abuse in Erie County itself? Like, how do we?
Sure. On a yearly basis, we receive around between 11 and 12,000 reports. We're currently running at about 1,000 reports a month.
And is that high, or like what's the average for across the U.S.?
Well, it's kind of hard to say that because it's typically these programs are administered by jurisdictions like counties.
Okay.
Every county is
so
different
it's all
in terms
different,
of size.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of the incidence per 1,000, it's pretty common.
Is there any speculation on what's unreported, or do we think is it a big issue in the community, or how should one look towards child abuse? Is it rampant, or is it?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it as rampant, but
What national research tells us is that on a national level, child abuse is declining, but it hasn't declined at the same rate here in our community in Erie County.
Is there a reason for that specifically, or it's just kind of hard to say?
There are different risk factors that people see with respect to a child being abused. There are different risk factors. Poverty is a risk factor. Young parents who don't have experience raising children, that's a risk factor. Substance abuse, mental illness. There are many risk factors that create a higher risk that a child will be abused.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And Imam Yahya, can you kind of explain, some about, you did have a panel a while back, and you introduced to the Somali community. If you just want to talk about how it relates to the Somali community.
By the way, mostly we work with the families and with the parents and with the kids. We meet with a lot of kids also. We interrogate them, and the parents also. But the thing is that some of people, they might think that, as we know that, and everybody know that having the kids, it is a gift given by God.
Right,
Means the most valuable thing that you have. But the way that people are taking care of it, it is different from one another. The issue, especially when some of them, they don't know why they have the kids and how they can take care of that. And mostly when we look at the issue nowadays here, especially among the refugee people, and we can say that it is totally like cultural, Somalian cultural, how to deal with the kids. But the thing is that as long as they have been in the camp as a refugee, they have been the family, the parents have been traumatized, and the kids also. And when they come here and they hear about everything here, they keep, they bring the culture, their problem, and their, what happened to them. And when they come here, they start, start having a problem
Is
with the
there
kids.
any way, if you don't feel comfortable, please don't answer, but is there an example you can give of something that's, in the Somali community that they don't know is child abuse and that they need to be educated about?
Well, the issue that they need to be educated is, the thing is that even though to discipline the kids, it is here also it is, open. They can say that they can discipline the kids, but they know the way that they discipline the kids is totally different than the way that we need, according to the system. That's what we are looking for, that we need to educate. So this is what we always keep, try to teach the people, and then they have to go follow this kind of instructions that they have to.
So what discipline methods do you guys teach?
Oh, the method that we teach. By the way, we are not teaching by ourselves, but
Right.
we always come like Bob and all those who are related with the issue. We have sometimes we have in the yearly, last year we did, and we try to bring those who are giving them, the exam, how they can, take care of the kids, how they can take that responsibility. And by the way, to help them also to give that education. This is how we educate them.
Okay. Going back to the facts and definitions of child abuse, we did mention kind of an age with sexual abuse of children. What is the definition of a child in
So
regards?
any person under the age of 18. I should have said that right from the very
Okay.
beginning.
No, that's okay.
We take it for granted that people understand what a child is, but your point is well taken.
It's it's a legal term. And so what about those almost children, they don't fit under the legal definition of a child, but they are still young adults and they may have encountered this abuse. What resources do they have?
Well, a child can report, a young adult can report abuse as a child later on, and it can still be investigated, at least by the criminal justice system. So just the fact that they didn't report it at the time that it happened doesn't mean that it can't be investigated at a subsequent point in time.
Additionally, if there is abuse going on at that time, there are programs designed to provide protective services for adults. And at that point, they're regarded as an adult, and they would be provided the same protection as any other person.
Okay.
Now, what are some symptoms of child abuse that, if you're an educator or a friend or something that you can, look out for? I mean, I'm sure it's kind of like a broad question, but if there's some certain symptoms that really,
Well, one of the doctors that works with us basically says you can't bruise until you cruise. So a child who isn't walking yet and who has bruises,
right.
visible bruises, that would be highly, highly suspicious.
There's certain parts of your body where we expect to see bruises on kids, places where you would normally get a bruise just from your normal play activities, your shins,
Right.
your elbows, your arms. But if you start seeing, serious bruising to the trunk of the body or in the abdomen area or even on the back or the buttocks, then you got to begin to wonder, how is that happening? And the biggest thing is, what kind of an explanation are you getting from the parent or somebody else? Or if the child is hesitant in explaining how they got those bruises, or they change their story. We see that all the time, where kids say one thing and then you ask a question because it doesn't quite sound right, and then they tell you another story.
That must be very challenging.
Sure.
The other kind is neglect, which is even more pervasive. So if you see a child who's hungry all the time, who's dirty, who isn't being sent to school on a regular basis, who has a medical condition that's being left untreated, these are all signs of neglect, and they're also very, very serious and need to be reported and addressed.
Okay. So if I'm a neighbor and I think I'm witnessing, my next door neighbor, their child is being abused, what action should I take? Should I document it? Should I call the police right away? What should I do?
If it's a situation where there is a child in danger right at this moment, the first call is to the police, always, because we need to act to keep the child safe immediately. Our agencies are not police agencies, they're social services agencies. They're designed to help people overcome challenges and problems. So then the next step would be to report it.
I just wanted to stop you because if you could just give an example of, if you endanger a child, like if it's an immediate endangering position.
If you see a small child unattended without adult supervision, and clearly the child is in danger at that point. They could be playing outside in near heavy traffic without anybody attending to them. That happens kind of frequently. The police come across kids who are out wandering around. A little child left alone inside of an apartment. It doesn't seem like it's can be all that dangerous, but it can be extremely dangerous because little kids get into all kinds of things.
So that's something that you should call the police if you see something like that.
Sure, or if you see a child being injured right then and there,
Yep. Okay.
assaulted. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. And
No,
then
that's
the
okay.
second part you're making about maybe not as an immediate danger.
Then the second thing would be to pick up the phone and there's a 24-hour hotline available in New York State. It's called the State Central Registry. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's in the phone book and it's been widely publicized. The number is 1-800-342-3720. And there's somebody there all the time to take those calls, and there are also supervisors on duty all the time in the event that somebody tries to report something and it's not registered and the person wants to talk to somebody about why it's not being accepted as a report. They have a responsibility to screen those calls to make sure that what they're hearing is in fact an instance of abuse or neglect.
Okay. Well, that kind of led into maybe another question. What if you're not sure? Maybe Judith, if you want to answer that, if it's child abuse.
You can always call the 1-800 number, as Bob said. There's always somebody there. If you're not sure, but you have a reasonable suspicion that abuse or neglect is occurring, you should make the call. And your identity is held confidential. So if somebody is worried that they don't want to get the neighbor mad at them or that somebody will take retribution against them for making the call, their identity will remain confidential.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering those questions. We're going to take a short break right now and we'll be back. Welcome back to the show. As you saw earlier during the break, there was a slide on the television with a very important number. So please feel free to give that number a call as you feel necessary. And we're going to get right back into the discussion. So.
Okay, Mr. Dees, I was at a panel that you were at that HEAL International had organized about child abuse. And during that, there was an interesting conversation, just the perception from the community that CPS or Child Protective Services kind of can take away and steal your children. You know, I'm sure you've had to defend yourself many times and kind of had to explain what CPS is, if you can do that for our audience now.
Sure. The message that we try to get out into the community is that although Child Protective Services is an agency that is charged with investigating instances of child abuse and neglect, the fact is our real mission is to try and help families keep their children safe, help their families stay together. The last thing in the world that we want to do is to take children away from their parents. Typically, what happens when we become involved with a family is we try to find out what the challenges are that are facing that family and what's led to the behavior that's brought us into their lives. And then our mission at that point is to try and help that family so that they can go on, address those challenges, and hopefully never have anything more to do with us. And their family will continue as the way it was before, only in a better way.
Now that brings us to our next question. What services are available for children and families to get out of situations like these that can, assist them and help them? And, is there counseling services for parents and children, and, what kind of services are available?
Well, our program, the Child Advocacy Center, we create a child-friendly response when an abuse, when something has happened to a child, and we bring in a whole host of professionals under one roof to minimize the trauma to the child. But it's very important for children to get mental health treatment if something has happened to them. Children can be very resilient, but they need to get the proper treatment. And at Child and Adolescent Treatment Services, we offer treatment to children and adolescents up to the ages of 21. But to get out of a bad situation, if, for example, there's a domestic violence situation and then the child's caregiver is being abused, then there are a lot of resources in the community to assist the parent. We have the Family Justice Center in Erie County. We have crisis services that can always be called. We have Haven House, a battered women's shelter. And we sometimes see children who are witnessing domestic violence, and that there could also be child abuse going on in that same household.
Going further on this, correct me if I'm wrong, and I hope I'm not repeating. When you mentioned about domestic violence, it brought to me, I was a social worker for a year, and we were taught that if a child witnesses their parent being abused, that is deemed child abuse. Is that correct?
It would actually be more of a neglect.
Oh, neglect. Okay.
Because the child itself isn't being seriously injured, but there is certainly a degree of emotional trauma that the child is experiencing by witnessing their parents being abused. So yes, that would be appropriate to report, and we would get involved with that and try to provide some of those services. Some of those services you were inquiring about, there are many community agencies that provide services to help families. Catholic Charities, Gateway Longview, Berkshire Farms, Monsignor Carr. Many of these agencies have contracts with the county where we actually pay them to work with families when they've been identified, to help them improve their parenting or improve whatever the living situation is that's brought them into contact with our department. The former Joan A. Mail Society is another one. It's now called the Family Help Center, I think.
Yes.
Right? They just changed their name. Buffalo Urban League. There are many throughout the community that are available to help folks in these situations.
Ms. Olin, can you tell us what a mandated reporter is? And
Sure. A mandated reporter is somebody who's legally mandated to make a hotline call of child abuse if they have reasonable suspicion that that's occurred. And there's a separate phone number that they use to report those cases. But it's also important to know that it can be anyone. Anyone can make a call if they have a suspicion of child abuse. But mandated reporters have a special duty. So you have your police officers, your school teachers, your pediatricians. If they have a suspicion, they're legally bound to make that call.
can you give us the number again, just for those who are watching this in case they need that number?
Yes, definitely. The hotline number is 1-800-342-3720.
Okay.
Now, if there's a child that's being abused and they're afraid to come out and tell anybody or say something, what kind of advice would you give them? I mean, I'm sure you guys see that a lot where, it's apparent, but you just don't, the child's too afraid to say anything. What's the advice that you guys give them, or, how do you console them?
To tell a trusted adult, whether it's a teacher, a counselor in the school, whether it's even a family friend, someone in their church, a parent of a friend, to find an adult who they trust and who they can confide in, because very often children don't report if they're being abused because they're afraid. And it's critical that they do so that help can be made available.
And I guess Imam Yahya will transition a little bit more to back to the Somali community. And if you just want to talk about what you're talking about during the break about education and how you've tried to advance it with HEAL. Yeah.
There's two sides of educations. One, people, they want to get educations to know what is it, how the system functions. And the other thing is that when they need help, the issue that we always try to give kind of education that to prevent them to be into trouble. So to before they get into problem, precautions. That's what we work on it. And then the other thing is sometimes they might look, you see, that the way that if they are in trouble, they always just call us when they are, in trouble. So this is what we need. We want them before that to at least, learn the precautions so how they can be prevented of getting into trouble. So, by the way, we work the two ways. We get those who are the DSS and then child protection. We come and educate them, bring them, give them kind of orientation that they can learn about how they can be, they can stop themselves, to get into problem. And then at the end, then how they can discipline. If they want to discipline, also how they can discipline the kids. They can teach the kids, they can educate the kids, and then they sometimes the kids also learn something. Or sometimes you might see that in one way or the other. You see that one time the father and the parents are in trouble because of the kids. They don't listen to them, and then they scare. So that those people they always come to us and say that, okay, we brought here the kids just to feed them, and then to give them a good clothes, and then to send them to school. So what about our respect and all this stuff? So we always try also give them also the kind of education that they have right to talk to them, they have right to discipline them the way that, according to, without beating them that much, means to get into aggressive. So the way that they can teach them, they can grant them to not, what they call, they are not going to give them to watch TV, or there is so many ways that they can discipline the kids too.
No.
All this need to be educated by that. So this kind of issue, this kind of education that we try to
And
make
how
it
can
true.
somebody find out about these educational programs?
We try to invite them to that.
Okay.
We
Can they
try
go
to
to
invite them.
do you have a website or phone
Yes,
number they
we
can
have
call?
we have our website, and then we sometimes get time from those who have this kind of education. They can train them, and we have also now at this time we have foster care program, parents foster care programs, and educating so many people, so many Muslims, or those people, because always they complain about when they take the kids, they take them to another place. And there's so many, means before to get to those, what they call, those means blaming the people. We tell the people that come learn something that can, make you in the good conditions.
Yeah, well, hopefully you'll continue to have those great panels, where it's an invitation for the whole community to come and ask, all these educated people all these questions so they can learn. So that's really great that HEAL's doing that.
Now, how can we and our viewers watching help support these child abuse prevention services?
We are working on the educations first, means educating the people and having them, giving them class, having parent what they call foster care parents, and having classes also that can educate them through
So you
this.
work with other organizations?
Yes,
too?
we work
Okay.
with the
Spread that information out
Yeah,
to your
we work
community.
with the other organizations. There is many organizations that we work with them.
And Ms. Olin?
Well, I think also in order to help children, we have to believe them.
Okay.
And if a child is telling us that someone's hurt them or something has happened to them, we have to believe them. We have to take that seriously and take the next step, whatever that is, whether it's calling the hotline, trying to investigate a little bit and see what's going on, but believe the child, because children usually don't make up these kinds of allegations when they're happening. It's usually something that's really happening in the child's life.
That's very good advice. And Mr. Dees, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure. I can't help but think as I listen to all of this, and it occurs to me frequently, that fundamentally all of us have a role to play. And government programs and community programs can do a great deal. And that's how we're all employed. Obviously, we value that. However, one of the risk factors for children being abused and neglected, as Ms. Olin was referring to before, one of those risk factors is social isolation. That means there are lots of people out in the community that don't have a connection with some other caring adult or some other family member who's there to help them when they're stressed or help them when they find themselves in a particularly challenging situation. And that's where the entire community can always help children by helping families. Each and every community needs to have centers where people can go. They need to have institutions like churches and mosques that they can reach out to. We need to have community organizations where people actually care. And on an individual level, instead of looking askance at our neighbor, we might offer some help if we see our neighbor struggling to deal with their children. We've all seen the parent in the supermarket with the child who is totally out of control. And you'll see people turn away and walk away. But another alternative is to walk up to the person and say, geez, it looks like you're having a hard time. Is there anything I could do to maybe help you out?
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Imam Yahya, Mr. Diaz, and Ms. Olin for joining us today. You shared so much great information for our viewers today.
Yeah, and we'll be putting up slides and phone numbers throughout the television show for our viewers also to see. So if you guys are interested in watching any of our other shows, please head to our website at westernnewyorkmuslims.org or find us on YouTube under Olive Branch Western New York. And once again, thank you for joining us.